Welcome to Marriage with Joy, which is the most open discussion on the internet about the positive, purposeful, powerful, pleasant aspects of living in harmony with matrimony. Marriage with Joy unabashedly discusses the most interesting questions raised by listeners. Our informed and informative panel addresses issues with thought, wit, and aplomb. Voted Best of the Web 2 years running. Good day, beautiful, bountiful, beloved immortal beings, and good-looking people. You're good-looking, you're always looking for and finding the good. You found good in abundance because you have chosen to tune in to consciously and conscientiously Marriage with Joy. Notice I didn't say marriage with joy. Marriage with Joy. This is the best show on the entire internet, and there's a lot of internet out there, about the true understanding of what marriage is and how important it is and how fundamental it is to the benefit of humanity, not just the United States of America or Western Europe or Asia or Africa or any place, to humanity. Because unless and until the relationships of husband and wife, man and woman, and we can discuss other kinds of marriage, are put into their fundamental place, which is to support one another and bring about growth in the human condition, then everything else is beside the point. Then we will continue to have difficulties, wars, misunderstandings. It all begins with the home. And I personally advocate for a relationship of a man and a woman. Now, I have also will say that there are relationships of two people, both men, both women, which certainly can work. And I know people that have made great marriages work like that. However, in the main, we're talking about the marriage between a man and a woman and a man. And on today's remarkable show, which I'm going to introduce our fabulous panel in just a little bit, we're going to talk about what I call wow. Now, I love words and I love acronyms, and I always like to find the positive, purposeful, powerful, pleasant essence of them. So when I use the word wow in all my books or anything that I talk about, it's always about meaning words of wisdom or words of wonder. However, I am making a detour today. And the wow that we're going to be talking about, at least initially, stands for war, W-A-R, on, O-N, women. War on women. There is a war on women that is raging, certainly in Western Europe. The rest of the world for the woman we won't discuss. However, in Western Europe, and wow, we got our Lori with us also, in Western Europe and what's called the Western world, the Judeo-Christian world, there is a battle happening. And the battle lines are drawn, and they're drawn very, very particularly between two kinds of groups. For want of a better term for the moment, is the introduction. People call themselves conservative, and people that call themselves, in quotation marks with a small p, and I mean it in the opposite, they mean it in the full way, we mean it the opposite way, progressives. I call them regressives, they call themselves progressives. The war on women is real. And I want to open with two pieces that to illustrate what we're talking about. And there are some indications that the war is shifting, and it's shifting towards the benefit of women. And yet there's an underlying current that is really angry at women. And I'll illustrate in just a moment. So the initial shift took place. We are now, I don't always tell the date that we're broadcasting, happens to be that this particular show is broadcasting on the 29th day of the month of April in the current year that is called 2025. So in the month of April, on the 17th of April, just 12 days ago, there was a ruling that came out from the highest court in the United Kingdom. So these are people that still wear the wigs and all that sort of stuff. And there was a ruling, because it was a court case, regarding the question, who is a woman? First of all, it's hard to understand why there should be a question. However, let's be blunt. It is a question in today's society. So the great magisterial eminences of the High Court in the United Kingdom, the highest court possible in the United Kingdom, did hand down a ruling after they heard arguments on both sides, and their simple. I'll make the ruling very simple. Was basically what they call the J.K. Rowling ruling, in the sense that J.K. Rowling, who is the author of a very famous series called Harry Potter. Now, Harry Potter, just by the way, to put it into focus, is I think is the third largest title in the history of printing. Number one, of course, is the Bible. Number two, interesting enough, is something called Chicken Soup for the Soul. In all of its permutations, I think there's 29 or 35 extensions. Chicken Soup for the Soul is number two, over 500 million copies. And Harry Potter is number three, which I think it's over 350 million copies. J.K. Rowling, of course, was a woman who was on the brink of financial disaster, who ended up doing her writing in a coffee shop in freezing part of England, I think in London, and managed to write a story that electrified the world. And she became not only well known, the remuneration was remarkable. She became a billionaire, and the world loved her, much like the world used to love Elon Musk. And then the world turned against her, specifically people on the left. And they turned against her because she made a statement, which is the following: trans woman is not a woman. Okay, doesn't seem to be that controversial. However, it was so controversial that people who loved her, supposedly, and followed her, left her, criticized her, shunned her, as they said in the 19th century or 18th century kind of language, and gave her the scarlet letter. and all kinds of things. That's why it's called the J.K. Rowling ruling, which is not. The ruling is very simple. It says, quite simply, that when they were dealing with something called sex of a man or a woman, that biological sex determines who or what somebody is. So there are two genders or two sexes, a man and a woman. Ah! Revelation! Well, to many people, I mean, it was really upsetting to a lot of people. This ruling made a difference, certainly for the UK. And in the United States of America, it's still very controversial. People are fighting it, et cetera, et cetera. And that's why I want to mention that the next part, again, this is mostly in the United States, although it does happen in Western Europe, mostly in the United States. And this is why I say this today is called WOW, War on Women. There is an interesting, how should we say it, idea that is being passed around and used amongst people of supposedly educated people. And it's something called a birthing person. You know what a birthing person is? Well, we used to call that a mother or a woman. No longer. I mean, I had to look it up just for my own edification to make sure I wasn't making these things up. And I won't tell you all of the words, so I'll just say that. But suffice to say, because I wrote some of this down, birthing person is someone, this term is used as a replacement. This is AI today. The birthing person is used as a replacement for mother. You hear that? For mother. It's a shift in terminology that is to be using to be more inclusive, because there are others who may not identify as women who can, you ready for this, still experience pregnancy and childbirth. So I can tell you, I'm a man. I don't understand what I just said to you, because I don't know of any man who can experience pregnancy and childbirth. I thought it was reserved for biological women. So we're not going to so much have questions, even though there are a lot of questions. Actually, I send this out to a small coterie of people that I deal with, that I always bounce things off. And I had a lot of feedback. And most of it, thank God, was in the sense of, Barry, you shouldn't even talk about this stuff. I love talking about these things. I think it's so important that we in our group on this podcast, which is called Marriage with Joy, discuss these issues because they're fundamental to who we are today in the beginning of the 21st century and where we're going. And so I'm trying to frame a question, and I really wasn't able to, so you'll forgive me, I hope. But I want to begin, of course, with Diane, and just ask you, please, to weigh in on first of all, this idea of, wow, that there is, in fact, in my humble opinion, a war on women, and that it's being waged even by people who are highly educated, seemingly of good moral judgment, and yet I find it to be undermining to the concept of family and marriage. So I'm asking you to comment on that. Would you please, Dr. Diane Medved, up there in wonderful Seattle, Washington, who's experiencing something called springtime.
Yes, we are. Yes, we are.
So please tell us what it's like, first of all, to live in a nice, beautiful spring atmosphere up in Seattle.
It is beautiful. Right now, this time of year, we have the tulip fields, which emulate the tulip fields of Amsterdam. And it's just beautiful color as far as you can see. This is our reward for our winter. So we're happy, and we get nice long days and beautiful forests that are repopulating with gorgeous colors. So no complaints there. My only complaint, Barry, is that perhaps you're being a bit of an alarmist. Because I do not believe there is a war on women. I think there's a small number of people who are saying outrageous things that people like you, perhaps, are glomming onto to make into a bigger problem than it really is. 70% of the American population is not comfortable with the idea of a trans woman being on a female sports team. They're not comfortable with that because it would be unfair competition. But that's a vast majority of people. And the rest of them, I would dare say, a large group among those don't know that much and don't care that much. And I think that a very small number of people are passionate about it. And an even smaller, tiny 9% sliver of the American population is actually a trans person trying to perform sports on a sports team. So the issue is very, very small, but we hear it disproportionately in the news and as topics of discussion. I don't think it affects 99.9% of those who are listening to Marriage with Joy. I just don't think it has any personal effect, except as it invades your brain and troubles your head and gives you something else to worry about that you needn't to worry about. Because women, there's no war on women, sorry. You know, the vast majority of 60% or more, 66% of college graduates are women. Did you know the majorities in medical and law schools are women? Women have options that they never had before, that we never had before. We can have children, and we cannot have children and not be shamed for it, as in generations.
Right. Yes.
We can choose to be married and choose not to be married. Now, obviously, I'm biased. I think marriage is the best institution on the planet, and it gives you so many benefits. But many people, unfortunately, grew up in a time of high divorce rates and were victims of their parents' divorces and may have personal fears about it, or all kinds of different reasons to delay or postpone and maybe not even get married. And they may wish that they could get married. That's not saying people are anti-marriage. I don't think they are. But I do not see any of this as part of a war on women. Because, again, in our culture, we are so blessed. We as women, and you as the men who support and care about women, should be thanking God every day that we live in this country and that we have as many opportunities as we do. Now, nothing's perfect. I'll grant you that. I don't think there's enough regard for women who choose to opt out of the workforce nowadays. And there's not enough regard for people who make motherhood their primary choice of what to do with their time. There should be more of that. There should be more regard for marriage. There should be more protection for people who are having marital problems, not to just opt out, so that they would have a supportive culture in which to heal their problems. We need more of that. Again, it's not a perfect culture, but I don't see that there's a war. And the reason why I think it's so important not to say there's a war is because to say a war on women is by its nature divisive. It's saying there is part of the culture, part of the population that is out to get the other part, which happens to be a majority. And it implies that men are making war on women. And I don't think that saying that, thinking that, perceiving that, publicizing that does anything to heal whatever divisions there are. And I personally feel that our job as good citizens and people who care about anyone else is to try to make life more friendly, more hospitable, more caring, more giving, all these positives, and not to focus on the negatives, but turn toward the positives and say, there's a lonely person. Can I invite that person for Shabbat lunch? There's someone who's having trouble in her marriages. Do you think her marriage, she might want a shoulder to cry on or someone to listen to support her in her marriage? We should publicize the good stuff about marriage, that couples who report that they are unhappily married on day one of a study by Linda Waite in the University of Chicago, 5 years later, 80% of those people report that they are happily married. If they just stick it out, they can make it work. And our culture is too me and moment centered. And if we can go beyond that, we can avoid a lot of the problems and provide support for our friends who are going through tough times, but realize marriage is phases and changes and ups and downs, and that we are not ever at war with each other, male and female, or liberals and conservatives. We should not be making war. We should not be talking war. We should be talking healing and caring, and first starting with our own universe, which is our own marriages, our own families, and working out from there.
Well said.
You disagree?
And I will take issue with a number of points, right? I certainly don't disagree that our podcast and everything we do is oriented towards positive, purposeful, powerful, and pleasant aspect, and does not in any way either condone or even want to have an idea that there is a war either on women or on men. And I think actually what happens is that what I call the war on women is almost more a war, if there is such a word on this, on men, and seeing men as not a helpful force in the process. Like you mentioned right now, the shift from, let's take half a century ago, because that's when I went to university. From the shift to half a century ago, when predominantly people who went to college and graduated college were men. Okay, just a statistical fact. And of course, everything is, as you mentioned, today has shifted. 66% of graduating, certainly when it comes to lawyers and PhDs, not necessarily doctors yet, although it's
in medical school,
it's 54% medical school at the moment. And so it's going to be predominantly women, although again, 25 years ago, pediatricians or even gynecologists, my wife, when we first got married, had a difficult time finding a gynecologist that she would go to because she wouldn't go to a man. Mm-hmm. He had to look to find a woman gynecologist. So from all of those aspects, there's not even a question. And the fact that you mentioned that 70% of the American population doesn't see a trans woman as a woman, still means that there's 30% that may. And that's a significant number. It's not, now, the number of people that identify as this, it's not even a statistical analysis. It doesn't even matter to talk about. The reason that I brought it up, however, is that because, think about it, that the highest court in the United Kingdom had to even rule on such a thing. It seems to me quite bizarre. It's almost like a bad novel from Jonathan Swift from the 17th century. why we even discuss such a thing? It's too strange. And yet we know that there are these vocal people, pardon me, that are advocating for what we will call, for what I would call something perverse, in that it disrupts the entire process of the marriage continuity, in the sense that what we're here to do in marriage is to create an atmosphere where two people can grow together and, God willing, grow with family. I mean, it's obviously, if you can't, you can't. And if you can, but each person, like you said, they may have started out in year one ready to get divorced, and by year five, not, because time enables people to work together and to work like sandpaper, or people working against each other, like you've mentioned many times, almost every show. It says in the Bible, in the original language, ezer kenegdo. Keneged means against one another. Now, against, people can hear that meaning opposite, anger against, or against in the sense of sandpapering and bringing about a softer, gentler, more available opportunity for people to live in harmony. So yes, I don't disagree with anything you said, and I do take issue in the sense that I'm alarmed and concerned when people will even consider using the term birthing person rather than mother. To me, it's
Silly.
more than bizarre.
It's silly.
Uh,
Because,
fine.
because as you know, hardly anybody would use that term. I mean,
Well, I'm sorry, but I won't. I have never heard of anybody that I know personally. I've heard it said many times on interviews with other people who consider themselves the 66% educated women, because and they're the part of the war. I will say, I'm using the term war, is that there's certainly not even an issue that people can get married at any age they want. What happens is that we all know, we think we know, that there's a biological issue that's different for men than women.
Mhm.
And the longer that one delays that process, the more difficult it is to engage in having family. That's all. I mean, that's a biological fact. So people not denying it, however, people certainly will not even think getting married at the age of 27. Well, that's kind of young, isn't it? It's like, sounds like 17. It's a different kind of environment. So it's something to be aware of in the world of women and men. That's all. So let's move now. And by the way, thank you for your vocal disagreement. I love it. That's why we do this. We're not here to rub each other's back with baby oil, although that's not a bad thing. Maura, please weigh in on this issue, what I call "Wow, War on Women," and Diane calls "Not."
Barry, people who watch this need to know this is a totally unscripted show, and it's very honest. Am I right? We never know what we're going to talk about most of the time. But I love it too, because I love to be in environments where I can speak with other people, learn from other people, and we can share ideas. And it gets us to consider what we thought, to weigh it against someone else's perspectives, and see what we could find out of it. So with that in mind, you probably know that most of the time when I speak, I will reference the media. For some reason, I've followed culture, and I've done this for about 40 years. I'm very much aware of the influence that our larger media has on the mind, the psyche, the behavior, the attention, the focus, and even the futuring, if you want to use that as a term, of our population. Now, I'm listening to all of this thinking, all right, what exactly is the question here? Think about this with the media and time and society in mind. You both had mentioned 70%. 70% don't believe it's an issue about men being women. What was the reason for that? Give me that as a starting point.
was 70% of the United States population do not believe that trans women should be competing against biological women in sports.
Okay, thank you. So much was expressed. I was like, where am I going to go with this? All right, Barry brought something up, and I thought about it in similar lines. That means that there's a part of our population that doesn't mind about having men participate in women's sports. Now, go back 10 years, 20 years, 30, 40, it doesn't matter. That would have never even been an issue. You'd be a woman in sports or you'd be a man in sports. And what's happened over the course of time, and I attribute it a lot to popular culture, people's minds and attitudes and value systems have changed. I will tell you, I think, Diane, you maybe mentioned it doesn't happen too often. I probably heard about this over 10 years ago with a woman that used to work for me living in Long Island, whose daughter was in high school. And I might have shared this recently. And she said, Maura, I'm so upset. My daughter and all of her girlfriends, they were all runners, track runners, and they were all competing. They were competing throughout the state. They were competing for college scholarships. And in more than one location, they had young boys transitioning and competing. And she said, Maura, in every single case, these girls could not compete. Now, let me tell you how I looked at it, and this will maybe go backdoor into the so-called war on women. Consider how long and how far women have gone to feel like they're respected and approved and participants in society. And yet at this point, it's almost like we're ending up in a cul-de-sac. And I'll give you a couple of examples. All right, one would be, how much did the women have to work in order to have their own arenas for sports? And then what happens? The men come back in, where women used to think we could never get into the men thing. Now men have an advantage and they're besting us all the time. That's one part. And I want to share something else. And this was very surprising to me. I like to get out and be among different groups of people because, again, that's how I learn. About a month ago, I had gone to a coffee book meeting, and it was for women who were leaders in their fields, as well as entrepreneurs. And the majority of them, I would say, would be younger than I. And everyone had been reading this book for women in business, and then they were going to talk about the book. What shocked me in speaking with them before, and it was an open discussion during this meeting, is how these women have worked so hard. They have gone to school, they've gotten master's degrees, they've gotten MBAs, they've gotten law degrees. They started maybe working as waitresses somewhere. They outworked and overworked the men. And they felt like they weren't respected. And they actually were telling, parroting out of their mouths what victims they were under men. And I'm thinking, I would put these women more on the, I would say the liberal, you could even say the progressive side. And I'm thinking, this is so fascinating to me because I was in leadership management for several years, and this was a long time ago. So I could almost be like their mother's age in some cases. And I thought to myself, I don't remember women who've worked so hard feeling so downtrodden at this point, disrespected, overlooked, that they have to work so much harder. And I thought a lot of this, I'm going to go back full circle, is attributable to the messages they get in certain venues from the media, from the influencers. So let's say naturally we just go about our business. We want to be the best person we can. We set our goals and whatever. But then we get ideas in mind, and suddenly things that weren't an issue become one. That being a case in point. I never, in my career, and I was an executive recruiter, I worked 2 very large corporations. I was always out and about. I never remember having seen or heard women speak so poorly of themselves as if there is a war on them. So I don't know how much this is contributing to the overall question you're asking, Barry, but I will tell you that I feel it works similarly. Women don't feel honored all the time as women, or appreciated or valued for just being who and what they are. But conversely, I would tell you that there's a lot of pressure on men today where even they question their role, their value, their input. A lot of times they feel, and I know this is not about the men, but I've seen the pressures on both sides. And when I look at it at a larger level, I see this as undermining humanity, undermining both men and women. And if you want to bring it down to the purpose of this podcast, it does undermine the marriage. Because I'll tell you, this was another really sad thing I found just reading the room and talking with these women. Many of them were not married and didn't even feel they had the time or the prospects because they were trying to work so hard as women to be respected. And I thought, and you could hear it, the desperation, that they didn't even feel like they were going to be able to find a husband or be able to have children because, God forbid, if they took any time off or did anything wrong, they'd be perceived as not being serious enough in their careers. Now, I will tell you again, the group of women I was with, I would put more on the leftist progressive side, which is fine because there were lovely women, and I could say the same about women on the other. But I would say there are pressures that have been placed upon our society where they wouldn't have been a point in our past, but they're becoming more and more of it. And so what is my answer? I usually say the same thing. I always look to model the best, model what I'd like to be, model what is true for me, and hope that I can be a positive influence wherever I am, whether it's as an individual, as a wife, as a mother, as a member of the community. And hopefully, I don't want to say be a counterforce, but to be a good light of hope and validation, let's say, for things that are real and things that are timeless as opposed to trendy.
Ooh, I like that. Timeless.
Don't ask me to repeat it.
Timeless as opposed to trendy. I will mention, it happens to be that I just saw 2 days ago an article I was reading, an in-depth article specifically about a woman who started a now very large company. And part of what she was doing, I think she has now 11,000 employees, which is a large company. And she started with one person, her. So it's a great story. And I think it's 60+% of her workforce are women. And she was not trying to hire 60% women. She was trying to hire the best people for positions and such. Okay, turns out 60% of them were women. However, as she mentioned, when she started digging deeper into who was at executive level positions, it was men almost all the time. And women, almost your words, Laura, were feeling that they had to work more, harder, show more, couldn't take time off, and felt themselves, not as she used the term victims, they felt that they couldn't even think of having time away from the business to have a family and such, almost echoing everything you said. And she was writing this story because she said, look, she built a business because she wanted to build a business, doing very well, making a lot of money. And she recognizes that what she was trying to build as a place that would grow people is not growing people. And she was struggling with how to find out, how do you do that? How do you do it? Because let's be blunt, there is no such thing as not listening to media. I mean, it just comes in under the door, through the windows, or even moi, who finds myself, working in a very niche, narrow place. I obviously hear things just because that's the way of life, right? You can almost smell it. And it's really difficult for women who want to have both a successful life in their career, whatever that be, whether it's law or sales or just working in a business, and finding the ability to have a marriage, have a business. Have a family. And the most important one, and this really hit home when I was listening to what you were saying, is that women are finding it more and more difficult to find someone that they can speak with on the opposite sex. Because men, we don't have those same issues. We have similar issues, but not the same. Men work too hard and that all that stuff. However, finding a man who is making enough money, and I mean that just using very blunt terms, making enough money to be able to support a family and make a decision. Well, we want to, let's say, find a woman. Do we want to get married? Are we going to work on one income? Which means that we're going to make a lower lifestyle in terms of what people think they want. Oh no, we'll have both and dual income. Well, dual incomes means how do you share responsibilities of having a family? Big questions, big questions. And I say, when I say war on women, now I'm going to be a little gentle. It's war on women in the sense that I think women have a greater, I want to avoid the term burden, and yet it's what I'm thinking, a greater obligation to be superhuman than men. You hear that? Used to be the man was the Superman. Now it's the Superwoman. I mean, you have to be able to have a big, run a business or be the best attorney or do this and have a family and be sweet and kind and gentle and decide, I'm going to make Alfredo fettuccine 3 times a month. Or that's a lot of stuff to be for a woman. You can't be a human being, just a human being. You have to be special. You have to succeed and exceed and everything. And by the way, Diane, so it's very interesting talking about 70% vis-a-vis, that was the sports situation. So we're looking at right now, I'm the state of Maine, where I say Maine because that's where your children live, Maura. And here you have what used to be considered a very conservative state, which has a very liberal bent, more liberal than you could even imagine, where there's a battle between the governor of the state and now the new federal government vis-a-vis women in sports. And part of the issue is competition, yes, from men posing as women. Okay, in and of itself, a very big difficulty. The bigger difficulty, from my point of view, if I had a daughter, I don't want a guy in my daughter's locker room. I mean, that is just so bizarre that guys can walk into a women's locker room. You know why? Well, I'm a girl. Get a frying pan, hit that guy over the head. That's a real difficulty. Women, because women were told for many, many years, well, men and women are just the same. You both have the same drives. You have a sexual drive. You have this drive. You go to school. You're just the same. Well, the reality of life, in my humble opinion, is that men and women are not the same. We're both biology. Hello, we have the same number of cells. Actually, I don't know. Do women have different number of cells? We have different hormonal makeups. The point is that I don't want men in a women's bathroom or women's locker room. And that has to do with the sports issue. And part of what makes me feel upset, that's why I say call the war on women, is that I cannot understand, because this came up at the University of Pennsylvania almost now it's 8 years ago now, that the first swimming woman, the guy, Leah Thomas, whatever his name is. I am just shocked that the parents of the people on the women's swim team did not protest and say, I'm not having my daughter swim against this guy because I don't want that guy in my daughter's locker room. And they didn't do that. Something was wrong with the parents. The parents did not come out and protest. The fathers did not protect their daughters. The mothers did not protect their daughters. And it became crazy. And so you had men participating in women's sports because why not? If you can get away with it.
Were these college students? I mean, if they were over 18, then they're adults.
They
would be able to speak their own minds and say their own objections.
And they didn't even do it. and I didn't understand why they didn't stop. Like the woman just recently in a fencing contest, an Olympic fencing, I think, no, but maybe it was an Olympic trial, but it was a high level championship. And a woman said, I am not going to fence against this guy who said he's a woman. And she took a knee, lost the match, and now she's kicked out of the participating, by the way. She did it because she said, now why, if everybody in the women's swim team said, I'm not participating against this guy. Okay, so they would have lost, they would have forfeited, but they would have made a statement and it might have gone rippled across America. It took years for one woman, Riley Gaines, to stand up and say, this is wrong. And I'm going to make a bold statement, and I say that I believe that Donald J. Trump is president today because a lot of people, women especially, decided he was going to help us in our battle, again, on the war of women, and he was going to work with our side. And they helped sway the election. Okay, wonderful. Lori, the wife expert, we're so happy that you're here. So what do you think about this idea that there's a war on women, and what do you see based on all the stuff we've discussing so far?
I think people are crazy.
Okay, well, that's a given.
The fact that they bring it up on the news and it's still a subject, it's like I play pickleball with other couples. And, but I get in these rotations where there's 3 strangers getting into pickleball with you. Every time there's a dude on the opposing team, the ball goes flying at my face, at my legs. It is pure aggression. And sometimes I'm like, dude, you see me? Like, why are you whacking the ball at me? I am obviously not that good at this. Why are you, boom? It's like, I don't understand it. Sorry. To imagine being really good at that sport and then a guy being really good at it and competing with me makes me sick. And the fact that the upper people don't go, wait a minute. Okay, you can decide to be a furry animal if you want to, but you're still a dude. Look at your muscles. Look at them. There's a comparison and it's just not fair. And then I think back to the day of like, when the black woman I can't remember her name. My brain is mushy now. I've had so many calls today. Like what's her name? The one on the back of the bus.
Oh, no.
Beretta King?
No.
The black woman on the back of the bus. What was her name? Help me.
Yes.
We all know it. As soon as we hear the name, we'll recognize it.
You lost too? You can't remember?
You're old,
People stood up for
What's her name?
What is it?
I was looking up stats when you guys were talking earlier and I couldn't find things either. The lady who fought not to have to sit on the back of the bus. I forget her name.
Yes.
But God love her, right? And women fought to get men out of their bathrooms and out of, like to be able to vote, to be able to, say, I don't like being married to that guy. We had to fight for those rights. I was reading this book. I don't know where it is. Anyway, about women's rights. Don't we have a right to play a sport with other women? I did not see women begging to play men's sports. And I don't see men or women begging to be in a male's locker room, even if they've become a man. I just don't see that. Do you? I think it's so one-sided and so unfair. And it makes me sick that some of these politicians aren't like saying, why is this even a problem? Let's solve it and be done with it so it ends. And that's what I think. The pickleball thing, it irritates me. I wish there was just women only pickleball, that I could not have a man.
I need to interrupt a moment. I am misunderstanding something. So in pickleball, are there, let's say you have 4 people playing pickleball, don't you choose who to play with? In other words, if you have...
There are some places it's beginner, middle, whatever, but the most of the park districts by me, it's open play and they just rotate in, rotate out.
Oh.
And even if you're in a beginner court, some jerk of a guy, if he thinks he's being cool, is going to smack it at you. Why? Because he's strong and he has more muscles. And it's not that he's trying to hurt me. He's just trying to show he's a dude and he can get it across, and it's going to, he's going to win. And that's what sports is. It's about winning. And if you've got someone who's twice the woman's size, and I saw that when she kneeled, and I couldn't believe I want to call him an a-hole, walked up and told her she had to get off. It's like, who like this? We're going to look back on this time, and our future people are going to look at this and wonder where was the common sense people? Why did we go through this? So going back to just trans in general, I don't care what you are. I don't care if you're Asian or Black or, trans or whatever. We all allow people to live as they choose. But asking other people to change to accommodate somebody else changing is not fair.
Okay, let's unpack a couple of things here. You said a couple of things I want to mention. Common sense people. First of all, her name was Rosa Parks.
Thank God. There we go.
And it was a unique moment in American history, wasn't it?
She chose to stand up and say something.
Right.
And I don't know. I don't remember if she got kicked off the bus. I don't remember the details, but she won in the end.
Yes. Well, it had to have a revolution in America for her to win, which is okay. But you talk about common sense. So let's be blunt on something. I think common sense is a wonderful thing, and it's lacking in not in American history, in world history from the beginning of time. It's a rare.
Can I say one more thing? I forgot to say this one part before you go, Barry. One more thing. If I was a trans person and I was a boy and I played a sport and I was going to play in that sport, I know I have an unfair advantage. Mm-hmm. I've been watching men and women do all this because I changed sexes. I know exactly what's happening. I'm entering into a more feminine zone. And now I'm taking my masculine thing and I'm going to be a man in my energy in women's sports. It's just like, as a person who transitioned, I'd back out of that sport, or I would play with the men and be in because your mind changed doesn't mean your body changed.
Well, they do have rules about having taken feminine hormones before being allowed to play. I understand there are certain sports that are making rules about how long the person had to have been taking those hormones. I mean, I think the whole thing is ridiculous also, but I think that they're trying to make some kind of, because the poor person, and I feel sorry for anyone who is born in a body and feels that they're in the wrong gender. I mean, I think that's a horrible thing to live with, and to what they go through to change genders. It's not simple. It's not easy. It's physically punishing. And I feel sorry for people anyway, of any type.
I mentioned something, Diane, that is a bit irritating, and it's important to speak it out. In the case of, let's say, Leah Thomas, who's the swimmer, and other people, oh, wow, this is interesting. We have nice people that are listening, and I neglected to look at their comments. They all said, hello, Rosa Parks, thank you.
You wrote it.
And let's say, let other women talk. Okay, this is really interesting. We got some great input here. Part of what's happening is that you can declare yourself to be the opposite sex. You see, the case of Leah Thomas, as example, in the swimming, you don't have to do anything. You just declare.
And now they're trying to correct that.
Okay, however,
I don't know how successful they are, but it is.
It's caused enormous pain. Because in my humble opinion, it's a W word. It's wrong. That's my opinion. I can say it. I think it's wrong. It's wrong to have a man, a biological man, competing in women's sports. That's all. Unless you say, something, everybody's welcome. Well, then it's not women's sports anymore. And it's so funny because in golf, There's a men's tea and there's a women's tea. Hello. And yet they're allowing men to compete. And let's be blunt, there's nobody that's going to allow, or at least not yet, a 6-7 foot all-star male athlete to play in women's basketball league. And bizarre stuff. Okay, the other thing is that, from my perspective, women are what I call the civilizing effect of humanity. Yes, women are softer and nicer and prettier, okay, all that sort of stuff as well. To me, without my wife, I would not be civilized. I can tell you. I mean, as nice as I am, and I'm very nice, and then the benefits, as Diane pointed out, the benefits of marriage are so deep, are so big, are so beneficial, not just to the individual human, to the community, to the country, to our way of life. And there's a struggle right now. It's a civilizational struggle. And it's happening throughout Western civilization. And it's a real big tug of war. Again, since I haven't the last word, I'm calling it the war on women. And it's deep in the sense that people are trying to find where they are, find footing. And you said it so nicely, Maura. Here you have wonderful, pleasant, highly educated, striving women who, if you ask them, by the way, would you like to find somebody to live a life with in marriage and stuff? More often than not, they probably say yes. Yeah, they might say also, let me know that obviously he's a nice person and he earns a certain amount and so you can have a conversation with not just a knuckle dragger. The point is that the ability for a man to meet a woman in a atmosphere, like you point out, Diane, nicely, at, let's say, a Sabbath table or a church sort of setting, some place that is a civilizing place, maybe on a pickleball court, except that they're playing on different, the men are playing against men, women playing, and they say, hello, the old-fashioned way. Wow, you attract me, I attract you. The ability to make sure that men and women speak the same language and they're not speaking about birthing persons, and they have an understanding that a woman is unique, unique. The ability to carry a child, a man cannot do that. I'm making a categorical statement. And I think the statement you can be watching this podcast 100 years from now. It'll still be the same. It'll be true then. 500 years from now, 1,000 years from now, man will not be able to give birth. Now, you might want to configure a human being looking like a man and making him have pregnant. I'm sure somebody's going to do something bizarre. That's not natural. It's not nature. Now, I would like to add, since we only have a few minutes left, that I'm going to mention something I did last time also, which was I'm a big fan of the Bible, as are, I think, everybody here. And probably a lot of our listeners as well. And I'm going to urge people, especially men, actually, no, I'm not going to urge people, I'm going to urge men to consider to do the following. And this is something that my dear friend, Michael Medved, has been doing for his wonderful wife, Diane, for 4 decades plus, and that I do for my wife, and that Jewish men have been doing for their women, their wives, for thousands of years. And there's a lot of other people that I know that say this to their wife. And it's the section in the area called Proverbs. Now, Proverbs is a remarkably wondrous gift to humanity. The final chapter in Proverbs is number 31. And the final sentences, sentence 10 through 31, are what we call the paean or the paean to a woman of valor. That's P-A-E-A-N. And it is so beautiful. The words themselves are remarkably loving. We set them to music. We sing it. And when a husband says it to his wife, it creates an atmosphere each other, each of them, and for the family and anybody gathered around the table, that creates a different tone and a different feeling as you enter into the meal. So we do this before we have the meal. And now what's happening is, in addition to the husband saying to the wife, I thank you for being you, I love you, I appreciate you, all of which are vital, by the way. I mean, you can't go more than 25 hours without doing that for your wife or your beloved. However, this, Proverbs, chapter 31, verses 10 to 31, Lori, I urge you, have your husband print it out from the internet. Maura, have Jimmy print it out, please, and do it this weekend.
No, I never thought of making it a tradition, but I remember Diane saying that last month. Yeah.
Here's what I urge everybody to do. And I believe that this will go a long way into never having to say the wow as war on women ever again. Because the relationship between man and woman, husband and wife, is so precious, is so beautiful, is so wondrous that, again, without it, there is no civilization. It's that simple. You can have a lot of people. You can do commerce. You don't have civilization. Marriage is the foundation of civilization. And the ability for a man to communicate with his wife and the wife to communicate with the husband is so special that when that channel is opened up, the benefit, again, to the household, to the community, to the nation, is transformative. And that's a trans. Did I say that? Okay. And so loath to say that thank you for people that are tuning in and listening and such. We like to do a blessing and a hug. So we'll do our hug together for everybody that's listening, thousands of people around the world actually that tune into this, and then a blessing. So on the count of three, we'll do our hug, which stands for, of course, heartfelt, unlimited giving, and then do a blessing. Everybody ready? 1, 2, 3. And our blessing from Maura, Diane, and Lori and Barry is go forth. Live exuberantly. Spread the seeds of joy, happiness, peace, and love. Go mad. Go make a difference. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Welcome to Marriage with Joy, which is the most open discussion on the internet about the positive, purposeful, powerful, pleasant aspects of living in harmony with matrimony. Marriage with Joy unabashedly discusses the most interesting questions raised by listeners. Our informed and informative panel addresses issues with thought, wit, and aplomb. Voted best of the web 2 years running.